Hello, I'm Becher Townshend and welcome to FontCast, Tasmania's top-rating politics podcast. I'm joined today by a somewhat battle-weary looking Brad Stansfield.
Am I looking battle-weary or...?
You're looking okay.
Look
Perhaps
neat,
you had a good night's sleep, but anyhow, that's what... Yeah, that's it. That's exactly right. Needs a haircut. Jack MIlroy.
Great to be here.
Good to see you, Jack. And the comeback kid, Alex AJ Johnston.
Thank you, Becher. Survived last episode, so it's good to be back.
And it's good to see you, mate. Well, it's been 2 weeks since our pod, and it's fair to say there's been a fair change of the mood over and the outlook of the federal election in that time. So, with now only a little over a week until polling day, we're going to take a closer look into the federal election and where things seem to be heading. And we can't go past yet another discussion about the state politics scene and the proposed Macquarie Point AFL Stadium.
Right. Where's David Killick when you need him, mate?
That's exactly right. Where's Killer? But before we start, Brad, there's been some interaction on the ex-social media platform involving you, Alex Johnston, and Eric Betts. You want to tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, it's not as bad as it sounds, I don't think.
It sounds pretty bad.
It does, doesn't it? So, look, people would probably be aware that for my sins, I worked for Eric Betts for 7 years. Before I worked for Will for 8 years, so I'm very ideologically balanced, I think it'd be fair to say. And
that all went smoothly, didn't it?
That did, yeah, 2014, 2018, 2021. Anyway, I hasten to add...
No, I mean your time with Senator Betts.
Oh, went brilliantly.
Went very well.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, he's in his heyday, fantastic political operator. I think you'd agree, Beach.
I do, yep.
And all of your political attacks, they all went very well, didn't they?
His gut instinct, Eric's, was very, very good politically. And in terms of hard work, I think he's the first senator I've ever met that actually has worked hard.
And he loves his politics, and he's passionate, and he has a go. And one thing I'll say about Eric is everybody knows what he stands for.
And everyone recognises his voice.
Yes.
Recently another Tasmanian political blast from the past. I think you'd call him a Sydney-based rabble-rouser now, John McGowan. I reckon you would know him, wouldn't you, AJ?
We did UN Youth together, John and I, or Youth Parliament back in the day.
Wow.
We went to Sydney together. Very entertaining character.
Yeah.
And so nicely self-deprecating too, which I think has helped him survive some sticky political situations.
Indeed. And I think good Glenorchy boy, I think. Anyway, so recently he was on a rival podcast. I won't mention its name for obvious reasons. And he said some nice things about me. But headlined that by claiming I had an unrivaled Eric Betts impersonation. So in the 2010 federal campaign, in fact, John and I were both working at central headquarters I think it was in Melbourne that year. That was a good campaign, that one. We nearly won. Reduced Labor minority after one term. Anyway, in that campaign, we spent a fair bit of time. We were 2/3 of the media team, banging out all sorts of media releases, and in quieter moments, we sort of would entertain ourselves with indoor cricket and Eric Betts impersonations, as it seems.
Could have won that last couple of seats if you'd...
Yeah, we could have done.
A bit more time working.
That's right. So, Eric Betts impersonations was what the discussion was about. AJ suggested that maybe he thought he might have a reasonable one too.
Well,
I want to hear yours first.
Yeah, I must admit, Brad's is...
What's the key to a good Eric Betts impersonation?
The key
does Eric mind them before we start?
Does Eric mind them?
I'm not sure.
Do you care? He's got a great sense of humour, so...
I think he probably secretly likes them. I once had a colleague who shall remain unnamed who rang Eric's office in Parliament House, and this colleague thought the number that they were ringing was to the general line, but it was actually to Eric's direct line to his desk phone, and Eric's answered the phone, and this person has started off by going, "Oh, that's a fantastic Eric Betts impersonation, John O." It's Eric. He knows people do them, and I think he does find them secretly amusing. So, the secret to a good Eric Betts impersonation is you've got to start your sentence with a "ugh," and it's got to be quite guttural. So, "ugh," and then you sort of get yourself into the zone and go from there. So it'd be Jono, and roll the sentence with the emphasis on the consonants, in a very, I suppose...
Is that it? Is that
Germanic?
You're going to give us something? Or?
But I'm not going to overdo it. I mean, it's been many years since I did it properly, but I mean, it is the is what makes it work.
Well, I'd sometimes work Erica Betts into a stand-up comedy routine.
Oh, yes.
And last year, I had this extraordinary situation where a guy asked me to do some comedy for the first anniversary of his business, and he sent me through the rundown, and it was Alex 10 minutes comedy, Erica Betts keynote address, Alex 10 minutes comedy. I was the only comedian on the bill, and I had to open for Erica Betts, and I said it was pretty awkward. First of all, they didn't give me a microphone, so I was just shouting. I said, there's two strange things about this. First of all, I normally have a microphone. And secondly, Erica Betts is usually in my material, not in the room. But Eric took it pretty well. If I do one, I always start with a phrase that you've heard a lot when he's on ABC Mornings, and he'll say, well, Leon, the Parliament will have the final say about the stadium, as it well should. So that's sort of my...
Good to be on the program. Good. Yes. No.
And it says Tasmania in a certain way too. Tasmania.
Tasmania. You just drop out a lot of vowels.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But look, I mean, one thing I've noticed about politics, and I think there was actually a study done once, is that maybe this is the reason I have hair the way I do, is that people remember people in politics for their hair, or lack thereof, and also for their voices. And if you think about it in politics, Christopher Pye, Eric Betts, these distinctive voices do carry a long way in politics.
At the risk of making this all about Erica Betts, I think a lot of people in state politics have actually been quite refreshed by Erica Betts's enthusiasm in coming into the state parliament. I think when he first put his hand up, it was sort of seen as he's sort of had his time, he's run his race. But in a lot of ways, he's injected a fair bit of energy, especially in sitting weeks, into the government. And in terms of answering questions in a fulsome way, he does it better than anyone. Actually goes and gets you the answer you want and comes back to the House with it. So credit where it's due there.
Okay, right. Well, there you go. That's
Jack's remaining very quiet.
Yeah,
Jack's
not gonna try that
silence,
one.
and I've got to say I cannot do an Erica Betts
Becher's
impersonation.
retaining his relationship.
Yes, I am. Right.
Jack
Now,
can do someone from the Labor Party. Do Tanya.
No.
okay, right. On that happy note, moving right along. So, as predicted shortly after we went to air on Friday, 2 days later, the Premier announced that he would be introducing enabling legislation for the stadium.
Gee, we didn't see that coming.
No, we heard it here
could have
first.
thought?
Well, what this new legislation will essentially do is provide planning and building approval for the new stadium to be built. As I understand, the Premier's proposed timing, the draft legislation will be released for public consideration in mid-May, with the aim to pass the legislation through both Houses of Parliament by mid-July, allowing for construction by Christmas.
Wow.
Yeah, there you go. We're all getting a Christmas present, aren't we? I'm sure everybody here will have strong thoughts on this. Jack, let's start with yours.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to talk separately about the kind of political response from the various parties on this in a minute, but just on the legislation itself, look, I think there's two ways to look at it. One is that the Premier is entitled to bring legislation to Parliament. This is something that the Parliament is able to legislate on, and it's not invalid or wrong for them to bring this. However, isn't the intent of this type of legislation that it exists where a planning system has failed? And in this instance, the planning system hasn't failed. It might, it probably would, if you want to get the stadium through, of course. But it hasn't in this case. So I think they have to kind of make an argument not only just for the stadium, which is what they're trying to do, but they haven't made a good process argument yet. And from what I can see, people in Hobart and southern Tasmania love a good process, right? Like, you done enough consultation? Have you followed the process correctly? I think in a lot of ways that holds us back. But in this particular instance, I don't think that they have a good argument on why they've adopted the process that they've adopted, and on getting construction started by Christmas. Well, that would be the fastest turnaround from development approval to building in history. So good luck with that. Probably they'll put some portaloos on the site and say
something
the construction
ceremonial. You think?
Yeah.
They already had some kids dig holes with plastic spades. I saw.
Hey, Jay, what do you make of it?
Yeah, I agree with Jack. Now, obviously, these are my comments. I work for two crossbenchers, Rebecca Pentland and Miriam Beswick, and they'll put their thoughts well and truly on the record. They're looking forward to it. In fact, from my point of view, I agree with Jack. I think the POS process was seen as being a very thorough one, and it was sort of going to highlight, and did highlight in the interim report, all of the big challenges. So I think moving away from that, the government now has a big challenge to try and sell how thorough its new legislation will be, and whether it can be as robust and it can address all of the same things that the POS process was going to, but at the same time, obviously, expediting the vote. So it's a big challenge.
Well, I know Brad's got a few things to say. From my point of view, I don't think it was ever going to get through the POS process. I think that's the simple reality of it, and I think the
when you say don't get through, though, I mean they weren't bound by what the TPC said, were they? What do you mean?
It was never going to be approved under the POS process. It would
No project has passed that process.
No. And so it was a complete fantasy, and that's the challenge the government's got. They're in a pincer movement. The more they move, the more they get locked in on this one. And we end up in this situation. I found myself reminiscing about a thing that is beyond everybody else's age group here, a thing called the Sheraton Hotel, which was built on Hobart's waterfront many years ago. We had a similar situation where we had to build it.
You mean the Grand Chancellor?
The Grand Chancellor. Okay. We had to build it at all costs. Had to be built. A person that I may or may not know spray painted on the front of it. Robin Gray has an edifice problem. And if you look at the base of it...
That wasn't you, was it?
No, definitely wasn't me. But if you look at the base of it, the first few bricks are pink, and then the next through are yellow, and all those kind of things. But it was this sort of dog's dinner of dogs. Sorry, dogs.
Becher's phone's ringing.
It's the nerve centre.
It's not mine because we know where that is.
Anyhow, Brad, you.
Yeah, no. Tell us more about the Sheraton. I mean, as I understand it, I was obviously very, very young.
Very young.
Didn't even live here. I was in some rocky outpost. But as I understand it, the original design was a spectacular glass thing. Is that right?
Yeah. So this is the mid-'80s.
Yeah. So we're not talking about the Grand Chancellor.
We are talking about the Grand Chancellor.
Same building.
It was the Sheraton.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the mid-'80s. I don't know why, but for some reason at the moment, Dallas keeps on coming up on my feed on Facebook. But Dallas was big shoulders, on dresses and things like that, big hair, big hats, the whole thing, J.R. Ewing, and glass-fronted sort of Texan-style buildings, and that's what we needed down on Hobart's waterfront, was this dirty, great glass building. The trouble is, all the seagulls would fly into it and kill themselves.
Was that actually an argument used?
Well, this is Hobart, come on. But generally it was seen as perhaps vulgar and a bit crass. So, of course, we couldn't have it as glass-fronted, so then we had to build it out of bricks, and then they started building it out of bricks, and, of course, somebody pointed out that those bricks aren't red, they're pink. We can't have a pink building on the front of Hobart's waterfront. So they became yellow. So if you look at the bricks, the first few levels are pink and the next few levels are yellow. And then if you go around to the police station just up in Campbell Street, you'll see a pink building because that's where all the bricks went. But anyhow, what I'm getting at was...
You could start a walking tour of Hobart.
Brickgate. There you go. Well, walking tour of Hobart's a great thing. Like some of Hobart's origins back to the 1820s are still there. Anyhow, point being, the point being that it was quite a contentious debate. We arrived in this place. Economically, things were pretty dire in Tassie. People were keen to see a new symbol of growth, of prosperity, of a new Tasmania. We'd had a pretty tough time, and so it was very much put forward as the sort of the panacea, this great thing that would, revive tourism, do all those kind of things. So. You can see the similarities between this and the stadium debate now, I've got to say.
Right. So, but just on the POS process, so you think that the POS was going to say don't build it, basically. And then the
POS
government
was going to say it's a complete stinker, don't bother building it.
Wouldn't the government have still tried to put it through?
Yeah.
Ultimately, it goes to the parliament, right?
Yeah,
That's what I mean. So
Yeah.
there was a world where the government played out the POS process and said, okay, we'll take its criticism on board, but we'll push ahead with it anyway.
Can I take you back one step? Why did it come up with the POS process?
No, I
AJ?
understand that. I know.
Well, for the benefit of
how
our listeners, we might explain
the
it.
POS process was not a recommendation. What's the word? Sort of part of the ultimatum.
A demand, yes.
A demand, sorry, of John Tucker and Lara Alexander when they were trying to find a way forward in the last term.
Yeah.
So obviously it was something that the government didn't want to do in the first place. But once you're in
They
it,
didn't want to do it because they knew it wouldn't succeed. It's quite simple. It was never going to succeed. Okay? It was doomed to failure from day one.
I think that's right. And look, I mean, this is now with the enabling legislation, will be the fourth planning process.
Yep.
Third, sorry. So it was already in the original planning process. It would have passed that by now if it hadn't been forced into the POS.
Yep.
POS is a death sentence. We said that at the time. It's now been put into a third one. And I've seen some interesting things said by some various upper house members, and we'll come to them, I think, in a minute. But, including those that voted against the POS process, now saying it should stay in the POS process, Ms. Webb, for example. There is a little bit of a short memory about how we got to where we got in the first place. Anyway, that aside, I think, Beach, the key part of all this, and you spoke about the Premier aiming to pass legislation by mid-July, is the word aim's doing a lot of heavy lifting there. One of my number one rules of politics is you don't bring on a vote unless you're sure you've got the numbers. And frankly, I don't think this bill has the numbers, even if Labor stays to their currently stupid position of supporting it. I do not think it will get through the upper house. That is my view.
There you go. You heard that first.
Well, we can go through and do the maths, and people can argue with me, but we'll do it right now if you like. But let's do some maths. So the Libs currently have 4 votes on the floor. 4. Sam, do you want to see if you can muck this up again like last time?
No,
I'm being harsh. 4.
We've got this covered.
Hiskett, Palmer, Digan, Vincent. All right. Now Hiskett is going to be defeated by Hiskett Jr.
Well, she won't be
May
defeated.
24.
She's retired.
The Liberals will lose that seat to Hiskett Jr., who's an independent. So the Liberals will have 3 votes.
But he's indicated that...
He's indicated, sure. Okay. But he's off their column for a start. He's not
yes, he's not a locked in. He's not a locked in.
So they're back to 3. Labor has 2 votes on the floor. And they also have Craig Farrell, who's the president, but he only gets to vote if it's tied. Otherwise, he doesn't vote.
Yep.
So they need to, and a majority in the upper house is 8.
So they got 5.
So they start with 5.
If Labor retains Pembroke.
If Labor retains Pembroke, and we'll come to that in a sec, and also if, I think they start at 5. They've got to get to 7 at least.
Yep.
To
force Farrell
to allow him to vote for the bill to continue into the committee consideration in detail stage.
Yep.
So they need, but then at the end of that process, they're going to need 8 votes to pass the bill in the third reading. Because if it's only 7, the president will be advised to vote against the bill at that point. So they actually need 3 votes from the independents, and that's assuming Luke Edmonds retains his seat, which I think we're not all entirely sure he will.
And you're assuming that Marcus Vermey loses. What is he, chopped liver?
Well, I think Marcus is going to give it a good crack, but I don't think he's going to be successful. I mean, Meg Webb is a very high-profile candidate, and we know in upper house name recognition is 9/10 of the law.
We're learning a lot about upper house campaigns, aren't we?
She's knocked on my door.
Okay.
I haven't seen Marcus.
So just before we get to going through those people in detail, Luke Edmonds.
Yeah, so we, as AJ, you revealed at the tail end of our last
the gloves
podcast,
came off in Pembroke.
Yeah, the bloods came. So
it was a short round.
Yeah, it was a very short round. So does somebody want to give us a blow-by-blow of this? Or?
Well, the brochure came out.
Yep.
Sort of going on the attack, authorised by Labor, going on the attack about Alison Ritchie, bringing up a few political skeletons, I guess you'd call them. But I was cautious at the time. Now, full disclosure, Luke's an old friend of mine. I think most people in politics knows that, and I think he's done a good job. but I said on the FontCast last time that I didn't think going negative was foolproof, and I think that's probably played out that way. Jack, do you know what happened to the brochure in question?
Yeah, I spoke to some people inside the Labor Party. The brochure was distributed in a limited fashion. Before it could be distributed any wider, the feds, I understand through Julie Collins, the federal MP, required that it be pulled and not be distributed any further.
That's because it's in the middle of a federal election campaign
yes,
as well, so it wouldn't have been a good look.
No, they did drop pretty nasty oppo in whether it's true or not in the middle of a federal campaign in a seat that we might talk about later as maybe not feeling as confident with as they did before. Okay. Although I do understand that the state party stands behind the material, and we might hear more about it in future.
Well, there it is. I think as some of us in this room, or one of us at least, has learnt through bitter experience, throwing mud during a Legco election campaign doesn't work, does it?
Yeah, it doesn't. Doesn't generally work. And I mean, I think sure Julie Collins intervened, but I think someone in Labor HQ, hello Jared, possibly forgot about the issue of the writs and the section of Electoral Act that prohibits you from naming an opposition candidate without actually getting their permission after the issue of the writs, which gave them a very, very short window. They couldn't actually have got them out the following week because they would have been in breach of the Electoral Act. Anyway, I do have a copy of this brochure here, one side. The Mercury declined to publish it for some weird reason after they
pixelated it out like it was
The facts on Alison Ritchie.
Yeah.
A couple tears from the ABC News. Report slams Ritchie over jobs for family, 10 June 2010. I think that's a fact. And Alison Ritchie accused of promoting COVID vaccine misinformation, in inverted commas. And a few X's here. Was found to have acted improperly as a legislative counsel by covering up her employment of close family members. Lives 30 minutes outside the Eastern Shore. I don't know where she lives. Has publicly supported an anti-vaccination agenda. Keeps switching allegiances for her own benefit, a switch between the Nationals, Labor and Independent. That's all true.
This is the most airtime the brochure's got.
It is. I should send them an invoice. And has recently cozied up with the Liberals. Worst of all is a photo of Alison Ritchie with Brendan Blomley and Eric Abetz.
Eric Abetz.
That is a dirt sheet, isn't it? Anyway, I mean,
All right.
I think but I think you raise a point. I mean, I think Luke will get re-elected, but he's doing his best not to at this point.
Yeah, it's not clever. Anyhow, let's get back to this Legco debate, Brad.
Sorry, yeah.
So we slice through the numbers.
We've got 5 votes for the Libs if Labor holds their position. Let's quickly go through the independents and see whether we can get them to act, shall we?
Yep.
Reef Forest.
No.
Casey Hiskett.
Well, I thought he'd indicated being pro-stadium, so
Maybe. We can give him a maybe.
I would give him a more likely than not, but actually I haven't spoken to him about so.
And Mike Gaffney.
No.
No, there'd be no there.
Rosemary Armitage.
No.
No.
Beck Thomas.
Well, Beck Thomas would be one that the government would be
Hoping for.
relying on or hoping
maybe.
for.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Cassie O'Connor. No.
No.
Sorry, not an independent. Cassie Green. Dean Harris.
Well, Dean Harris indicated that he liked the POS process. So
I think Dean's a no at this point.
Yep.
And I haven't written it down. Sorry, Meg. Strange.
Tanya
Tanya Rattray.
Tanya.
is a yes.
Yes, at the moment. Meg Webb, a no.
Webb.
Is that all of them?
Yep.
So what's that?
So it depends. It's sort of 7.5, really, isn't it? Because it's
There's no doubt that Casey Hiskett's view, Beck Thomas's view, and Dean Harris's view are going
they're not exactly locked in. I think that
my view is Dean Harris is locked in as a no and is not for turning. That's my understanding.
Yep.
I think Beck Thomas is a soft yes, but will come under massive pressure.
Huge pressure.
And I think Casey Hiskett.
When you say come under pressure, where do you think the pressure will be greatest to vote yes or vote no?
I'd vote no.
Yeah.
From her fellow independents upstairs. There'll be a lot of
collegial
sort of pressure up there.
Yep.
And I think likewise Casey Hiskett, what better way to prove you're not a Liberal shill like your mum was than to sink a stadium that no one cares about in your electorate.
And don't lose sight of the fact in the Legco, this wonderful tradition is a house of review. So when you've a government that starts ramming through legislation that seems to abuse that process, then the Legco tend to go, well, hold on, that's what we're here for, and if we support this kind of stuff, we won't be here for much more.
They can also slow it down, can't they? They aren't required to do this on the government's timeline. They can, I imagine.
So we won't have the
reviews, inquiries, hearings.
We won't have the stadium by Christmas.
Well, here's a question. Do you think it's fair? I mean, there is going to be an enormous amount of pressure, and Brad says pressure to vote no. I think there'll be a tremendous amount of pressure to vote yes. We've seen the pro-stadium people, already put pressure on. I mean, I think Dean Winter has said openly that, he got a lot of feedback during the last campaign that people in Franklin, and that's where it polls the best, wanted the stadium. So pressure, full stop.
Yeah.
Is it fair to put that amount of pressure on those independents in the upper house, given that...
Of course it is.
That's what they signed up for.
Boo-hoo. So sad. I guess.
Well, but they're not planning experts, are they?
No, but that's what they're elected to do.
I'm just asking. Just asking the question.
They're legislators, okay? So that's exactly what they're elected to do.
But are they
Thank you
going to
very
have to
much.
make judgment calls on the stadium on
Yes.
areas of expertise that they don't naturally possess?
No, they're just voting on
They'll have to
legislation.
do their own work to work it out, won't they?
Yeah, I'm
I'm
sorry.
just asking the question.
No, I get it, and I get
Because-
that they're going to be under a lot of
During
pressure.
COVID, you got to do your own research. How many seats are we talking in this stadium?
Well,
23,000 apparently.
It's small, right? We can fit it anywhere.
Anyway.
okay.
Anyway.
That's tiny. That's like smaller than Subiaco.
No,
But
nobody's...
look, it's a reasonable point to ask, Alex, and I think...
Because I guess my point is that they were feeling like you could be guided by the POS process, and now it's sort of more pressure on them because they don't have.
Well, I think it's completely fair, but I think some of them are already looking for excuses like that to not vote for it.
Yes. Yeah, that's correct. Yes. So, look, that's pretty sobering, I think, isn't it, in terms of it? And I'm loath to do this, but can we have another talk about Labor's position? And I'm looking at you, Jack. Okay. As I understand...
Well, that was the big talking point from the last episode. That's what everyone wanted to talk to me about. They wanted Brad to explain whether he's serious that he would advise Labor to vote against it.
Am I ever not serious?
No, I mean, you're a deadly serious human. But anyway, first, sorry, Beach, to interrupt.
No.
Let's
That's
not
exactly right.
forget
So-
to come back to that.
Well, Labor's current position on the stadium is to support the legislation so work can get underway, and then hopefully it'll be off the political agenda, freeing them up to win the election on other issues. Gee, that's another winning strategy, Jack.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about this last week. It's we called it the neutralisation strategy. Neutralise the stadium and do normal politics on health and education and, et cetera, et cetera. That's the same strategy the Labor opposition has tried many times in the last decade, and they're still the Labor opposition on a range of issues. So I think they've got two challenges. The first is that in 2025, the most valuable commodity in politics is attention. It's not, whether you're right on something, it's whether you can actually get attention. And as an opposition, that's the hardest thing to do. So, we've got this situation where the thing that's going to get attention in this state this year, next year, through the next state election, and probably beyond, is going to be the stadium. And if what you've done is essentially sideline yourself from that issue, then when the news cycle focuses on the stadium, as it does relentlessly, Labor's not really got a place in that news cycle. So from a purely tactical point of view, if you're not attaching yourself to the issue that people are talking about, and people actually do talk about this. They don't talk about most political issues, normal people that are not weirdos like us. People talk about this issue, and Labor doesn't really have a place on this issue anymore because they don't have a position that creates contrast with the government. So the second thing is, Labor is really trying to beat the government up over the state of the finances and the budget, and, more power to them. They should. It's in a bad position. But it does strain credulity a bit when you're saying, essentially, we'll give a blank check to this project. It undermines that other political argument that they're trying to make. And this is all without, not saying we shouldn't have a stadium or a team, et cetera, et cetera. But if you're in opposition and your goal is to do damage to a government, they've dealt themselves out of that.
They've definitely done that. And how about they just let it run its course and sit on the side and chip away?
Try that again.
Just
They talk about it in school classes.
The stadium, I mean,
It's a big school.
Jack's right.
Issue, yeah.
It's the number one issue, and it's going to be the number one issue for a long time. I noticed recently Dean Winter changed course a little bit on radio and was very critical of the way the government had treated the TPC, and to a lesser extent
After the last episode, I think.
Dr. Bruin,
And I think he moved into the right position. I think he moved into where he needs to be on this one.
Well, he criticised the Premier of using parliamentary privilege to sort of undermine, say that the report was tainted. Sounded very similar to a couple of crossbenchers I know. But I think it's crazy to suggest Labor would change its position again. And I say this as me. This is not a representative of the MPs that I work for. To backflip on a backflip, yeah, okay, I'd agree with Jack. They'll get attention. They'll get attention for being the most wishy-washy opposition of all time. They've locked into a position. They can't go anywhere on this.
I'm feeling a little bit deja vu, AJ. I think we've had these discussions in the past.
Brad sits here and espouses, you've got to stand for something. People got to, you've got to be strong. You're suggesting a party that went, we oppose the stadium, we'll hand out stickers. Now we're all for the stadium. You're contemplating them changing their mind again and arguing that would be in their political best interest?
I think it's a bit more nuanced.
Yeah, I think there's daylight between them.
Hang on.
There's no nuance. There's no grey in opposition. You're either black or you're white. You're for it or you're against it. All right? And at the moment, they are for it.
Yeah.
And
Are you
let's go back a step.
Spell it out for me. What would you do?
Where are Tasmanian elections won?
In the middle.
No.
In the north.
Thank you. Right.
I mean the middle politically.
Yes, but they're actually
geographically.
Well, that's actually not right. They're actually run.
Oh, you don't think so?
They're actually won to the centre of the right in Tasmania. If you look at Jim Bacon, Paul Lennon, Will Hodgman, Jeremy Rockcliffe, Peter Gutman, centre right is what wins your elections. But more importantly, what wins your elections is the north. Where is the stadium the most unpopular?
Oh, would that be the
North? That's right.
Oh.
It's strange, that isn't it? It's basic political math that if they oppose the stadium, they will win 4 seats in Braddon.
Yep.
4 seats in Bass.
Yeah, but we don't
4
have a time.
seats
We don't have a
in
time
Lions.
machine.
You
Brad.
wanted me to spell it out?
That's
4 seats in Lions. What's that equal?
That's 12 seats.
They will still win 3 seats in Franklin.
It's 15.
They'll then win 2 seats in
17.
at least 17, and then they just need one more. Is there anyone floating around that could possibly help them form a government?
I don't know. Any former members, any independents?
It's just basic math.
Yeah.
Your job as the leader of the opposition is to do whatever you need to do, crawl over broken glass, whatever, to win an election so that you can implement your program. That's what they should be doing.
Yep.
I just think you're ignoring reality. If they were to change their position again, the Liberals' attack would be Labor can't be trusted to.
They'll already
keep
say
their
that.
word
They
on
already say that.
anything.
But look what's happening. Well, look what's going to happen to the stadium in the Ledgeco. Anyhow, it's done. It's cooked. It's gone.
But you guys are saying that. I mean, I'm not running commentary on that. I'm not going to predict how it's going to end up. But I just think that what you're saying about them oscillating between positions goes against some of Brad's cardinal rules of politics.
Well, they're number one rules.
Like, I'm not saying if you could go back in time, you would do it differently. That's fine. But to suggest changing position again. So if you went in there as an advisor, Brad, what would your advice be in terms of messaging on the stadium in the short to medium term?
Well, one, the government has changed their approach to getting it approved. That gives us an excuse by itself to vote against it, to change our position. 2, they're going to spend more than they said they're going to spend, which gives us a second excuse to vote against it.
Yeah.
Let's go.
And what about the team? We don't get a team.
As I've said before, and I'll say it again, if that's the price of me, Labor leader, winning government, I will happily take it.
Yep. Right. Okay. AJ can reflect on that as we move on to
I actually don't think it will be. I think that the team is so far advanced that you would be able to steer the AFL down, and you would get the team and you would play York Park in the north, by the way, for a couple of years, and with a promise of possibly building a stadium at some time in the future when we can afford it.
Dare I say, if you throw enough money at it, you probably get it too. But anyhow, Right. Okay. I guess time will tell on this. It's even on the script. There you go. Anyhow, let's switch tack to the federal election. Jack, I'll start with you again.
Okay.
Seems to me that you start and then Brad comes in at the end. Seems to me that Labor has the wind on its tail and they're currently cruising towards a win, perhaps with an increased majority.
That seems to be the vibe, doesn't it? Labor's campaign has been almost flawless nationally.
Yep.
Full credit to the campaign team. Paul Erickson, National Secretary, has run a very disciplined campaign. The Prime Minister has campaigned in a workmanlike fashion, as he does, has not made mistakes, which is really the currency in national election campaigns. Labor hasn't had any candidate issues that I can really remember. We haven't lost any candidates. All of the little things that usually happen at the beginning of a campaign to kind of blunt your momentum have not occurred. And the Liberals have run an absolutely shocking campaign. Peter Dutton seems to have peaked in October 2023 around The Voice, and it's all been kind of downhill from there.
Yep.
You don't want to get ahead of yourselves, and I do think part of what's happened here is the Liberals got ahead of themselves in the last 6 months and kind of took victory almost for granted. And I think that's a space that Albanese likes to play in, and he likes to fight out of a corner. And I think we're probably heading for a Labor government, it looks like, and potentially with an increased majority. Although, we'll see. There's a lot of seat-by-seat stuff that could be a little bit squirrely.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some sense of ascendancy here. AJ, what do you make?
Some sense.
Well,
Have they been thrown by the trumpet of patriots? I mean,
we'll get to them in a minute, Sam.
If ever I've seen one.
Goodness me, the trumpet.
AJ's got notes here.
The trumpet of patriots. I mean, imagine how.
Imagine the branding meeting.
Imagine how much good they could do with all that money. You could just pick one issue and just.
It's almost like they don't care about those issues.
Educate Australians on something, or just I don't know, make it funny, or I don't know. Anyway, it baffles me. It baffles me. An exclusive exit poll, this is from the News Limited papers today, of nearly 4,000 Australians who cast their ballot in the last 2 days shows a 4.6% primary swing to Labor compared to the 22 election. Now, that would be good news. Now, Brad will say that it's probably not scientific, and that's true. Exit polls can be a little...
It's not an exit poll. It's a exit survey.
Exit survey, okay. Very good.
Is it weighted?
Well, I'll have to dig a little deeper.
No.
According to the exit poll NE survey...
Thank you.
Ms White, this is the Labor candidate in Lyons, primary vote is 54%, while the Liberals are on 29...
that's a credible exit survey, isn't it?
29.3%.
54% primary vote.
Yes, well, I don't think anyone expects the former Labor leader and Brad's...
Kim Jong-un numbers there.
Brad's favourite...
it was very popular.
Favourite... what do I say?
Favourite person.
To get that high a vote. But, Brad, that must be a worrying sign. Even if it is very unscientific, you would rather those numbers be reversed, wouldn't you?
Oh, well, you always want numbers to be in your favour no matter what they are. I mean, I think that so-called exit poll is a piece of rubbish. We run an actual polling company, our good friends at EMRS, who sponsor this show, and they do actual polling as opposed to that sort of stuff.
And they weight numbers.
That being said...
speaking of, I hear there was one on the stadium in the field. When we might we hear about that?
Well, we couldn't possibly talk about our privately commissioned work. I'm sorry, Alex.
Okay, sure.
In terms of the federal election, I mean, I do agree with Jack. I think that the Federal Labor Party in particular have run a very, very good campaign. It's been very professional, and I struggle to think of a mistake that they've made at a federal... But that wasn't at a federal level. It was a local issue. I mean, Albo fell over and then fell off a stage and said he didn't. That's about the worst of it, quite frankly. It's a bit weird to deny it, but anyway. But they have run a flawless campaign. One of my number one rules of campaigning is, and I learnt this many, many years ago, and in fact, I think it rose to prominence when Kevin Rudd won in 2007, and there's only one effing message. Right? And in the Kevin 2007, the message was... working families, and in this election the message is Peter Dutton will destroy Medicare. And it is the only message they are running. Every time, almost without fail, Albo stands up. He's not standing in front of a ALP banner.
No.
He's standing in front of a Medicare banner. That's all they're talking about every day. And they're just driving that home. And some of the direct mail pieces that they've sent, I had a copy somewhere in my office, they've sent out to voters, including little fake Medicare cards. Very, very clever, very, very effective, and it makes, I would suggest, Mediscare 2016, Bill Shorten's, look like a poor imitation of what they're doing now. They've run a very, very good campaign.
Yeah,
I'm surprised too. I mean, I thought that Dutton would campaign better. I thought he would have, more energy, and I thought it would be a lot closer by this stage. But I've been very surprised it's sort of gone the other way. And my question would be, given that everything is pointing towards Labor being re-elected, is that a worry for the Liberal Party? If you get to the last week of a campaign and things look inevitable, can that make things go from bad to worse?
Well, the last week of campaigns can always, they sometimes can go very badly. Even if things are looking bad. I do remember 2014 when Nick McKim held a press conference at the start of the last week and declared that the Greens would be the official opposition after the election, basically conceding for everyone. And then things can roll very bad. I mean, look, who knows where things will end up? But, there's still 9 days to go. But as I say, I think...
it can go both ways too. I mean, Australians don't like to give a government a runaway victory, but I'm not sure we're quite at that point yet.
I don't know. There's a lot of conversations around that kind of thing. I mean, Albo's staring down the Greens in terms of any deals. Those kind of conversations are occurring during the campaign, which is to me quite surprising. I think the big shift that's occurred nowadays is this pre-poll. A lot of people are going in pre-polling from yesterday, so the die's sort of cast.
Vote gets banked and you can't change it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But there's no doubt Labor have run a very effective campaign. The Liberals have had a couple of backflips on policies. You backflip on your policies, or you just get it wrong. Just a sign of the chaos within the organisation in terms of running the campaign, and it's a real sign that. They're really struggling. I think they're struggling with their policies. There's nothing that's resonating with me, that's for sure.
Again, I hate to roll out too many of my number one rules in one episode, but another one which I think is very pertinent is that campaigns are seen by the public as a proxy for how well you would be how well you could govern. If you run a good, disciplined, strong campaign, people say, you'd make a good government. But if you do the opposite, that people judge you on these things.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I once did a debrief with, I think it was Jeff Walsh, who was Secretary of Labor many years ago, ran the Latham campaign, and he basically said, look, an election campaign brings together the last 3 or 4 years of politics. It forces people to think about whether the government was any good, whether they were terrible, those kind of things. And clearly what seems to be the sense is people are going, well, this hasn't been a bad government. And my point that I've been making for a little while now is they just don't have the pitchforks out for Albo. They're just not out there to get him. They're not in Tassie anyhow.
Maybe it's time I came up with some number one rules to rival your number one rules.
I've trademarked mine.
What about don't try and sell nuclear energy to a generation that grew up watching Homer Simpson try and run a power plant?
Yeah.
Would that be one?
Yeah, it could be.
Do you think that's a factor?
Well, I mean, it's not a rule because that's too specific. But I think it'd be fair to say that it hasn't been much talked about by the Liberals this campaign, has it?
No.
I think Alex can have a rule that says his rules can be whatever they want to be, actually. But anyhow.
Don't make your rules too specific.
All right, well...
is the 8th number one rule of Brad Stansfield's rules.
As opposed to...
Gee, Fight Club would have been boring if Brad wrote it, wouldn't it?
The 12th rule of Fight Club.
The 83rd rule of Fight Club
It would
is...
literally be this.
All right, let's think about winding this one up. But I do want to ask people... We did a round of the ground last time in terms of what people were thinking locally and in terms of the federal seats. AJ, what's your thoughts?
I don't think I would predict any changes, though. With Labor looking better, I think Braddon might be closer than we think. I'd still have it parked in the Liberal column just because they've been so strong in Braddon for so long at both federal and state level. But that would be the one that would potentially move. I think they'll win Lions and they'll win Liberals will win Bass.
Got to get 54% of the primary.
Well, she won't get 54% of the vote, but maybe if she did, you should have to, I don't know, write a poem about her or something. Yeah.
Poem, okay.
An I'm sorry poem.
I don't think she'd like that.
But what about the Senate? Do we see anything happening in the Senate?
Can we just do the other seats quickly? Sorry.
Oh well,
that's
yes.
that's your prediction. Sorry.
Yeah.
I think no change as well. I think Braddon is solidly Liberal. I think if anything, the national environment probably just helps pull Rebecca over the line with a little more confidence. That goes for me from being a really tight Labor win to maybe slightly bigger margin than last time, but we'll see.
Yeah, my view hasn't changed that much. It has changed a little bit in the sense that I think the federal campaign is, the Liberals' poor performance is starting to have a bit of an impact here in Tassie. I think if I was Labor in Bass, I'd be sitting there going, oh, perhaps there's a bit more of a chance. I don't think there is, but I think where once they saw that as a seat that they weren't really campaigning for, perhaps they're looking at doing that now. Down here in the south, I mean, we've talked about Peter George, we've talked about the Greens before. I still think that's an issue, but for me, the status quo will be maintained.
Yeah, I'm keen to have a bit of a quick chat about Frank before we finish up. But just quickly, AJ, you mentioned the Senate.
Oh, I just think, do we see any surprises there? I don't, personally. I think it'll be fairly predictable.
Yeah.
The status quo will remain, but I'm fascinated to hear Brad talk about Franklin. Are you warming to Peter George? Last time I listened back. It was a spirited plumping for Mr. George.
I am. I am. A few reasons. Firstly, after we went to air, our good friends, show sponsors at EMRS did release a public poll. Now, on face value, that showed Julie in a very strong position.
A very strong
38%,
position.
I think. But you had George just sort of popping his head up above the parapet at 13%, and then you had the Greens at 13% as well. Okay, so a few things have happened. That was two weeks ago. So the poll was in the field 3 weeks ago. So a few things since then. Firstly, as Kevin Bond has pointed out, I think he's right, these sort of independent campaigns can snowball very quickly. We've seen this in other independent seats around the country. They can just go from zero to hero very quickly. So you just got to bear that in mind. Secondly, Peter George is backed clearly by a truckload of cash. We can all see it. You can see the newspaper ads, you can see the TV ads, you can see the online ads, the billboards.
Nice photographs.
Yeah, I mean, he's disclosed, I've seen at least 5 different versions of his TV ads. He's disclosed he got 30K from Climate 200. I reckon more like 300K from Climate 200, to be frank. I mean, he's literally drowning in money, and at the point where I think they're trying to find ways to spend it.
Not literally drowning in money, is it? That would be a hell of a...
Well, it's got me.
That would be a hell of a story, wouldn't it?
Bang. All right. He's
Scrooge McDuck.
He's not literally drowning in money, but he's got lots of it.
That's
the
more
second
than
point.
enough.
The third point, you've got his proxies running a campaign for him. So Bob Brown Foundation, the Neighbours of Fish Farms, which of course he used to run or still does run, and there's I think another group's entered, some sort of environmental group, that are all running the same message. In fact, there's TV ads with AI generated salmon. I see, like they're really pushing. He's got everyone's pushing in his direction. There's a few things running the other way, to be clear. So the Libs have decided to preference Julie first. Before him. But the problem there is the Liberal vote in that poll is at 19%, and if Peter George continues to go up, the Liberal vote's going to go down.
It won't matter.
So it may be such a small number that it is not that relevant in terms of preferences. And in any case, how many people are going to follow a Liberal head of a vote card? How many are they going to hand out? Who knows? Then we have the debacle with the Green candidate who turned out to be a Kiwi, and then it's not a Kiwi or something, and they got the Greens saying, well, we're not going to campaign for Peter George, but vote for our guy, then vote for Peter George so we can get the trouser of the taxpayer money on the way through. I think, despite the Greens' best efforts to get that money, Green voters are pretty sophisticated, and I reckon most of them are going to vote for Peter George despite the Greens' best efforts.
That's exactly right.
So I think all those things pushing, very strongly in George's favour.
Yep.
I also think the best judge of where campaigns are at is to look what people are doing. When was the last time Julie Collins had a campaign launch with the foreign minister launching it? Like never. Happened last night. When was the last time... Well, Julie Collins is the agriculture minister for the country. She has not left Franklin for the entire campaign. It's like there's been floods in Queensland. And she's literally campaigning for her life.
Yep.
And my final point, then I will stop, is that I'm told that at pre-poll over the last couple of days, first 2 days at pre-poll, particularly on the Eastern Shore, but also the joint booth here, Peter George's people are about 40% of people are taking Peter George material.
Yeah.
40%.
Yeah.
Now, if that's replicated across the electorate, if he gets anywhere near 40%,
So the
he will win.
the exit poll's rubbish, but you'll weight heavily anecdotal evidence. I'm just teasing a little bit, but I mean that.
Well,
You can take someone's material and not vote for them.
You can, but I think that what I'm told very strongly is people are searching him out and his volunteers out, like the same way they'll search Andrew Wilkie out and their volunteers out. Like there is a very strong movement. Now, Julie might still squeak across the line, but if I was her, I would, well, she clearly is, would be very, very nervous.
I think Peter George is running a very sophisticated campaign. I think it's very, very healthy that there's an independent in the race. I think
Is money like that good for Tasmanian politics?
I mean, there's money.
Well, the funding arrangement's about to change after this election.
There's money
anyway,
in
so
there's
it won't
money in
happen like
politics
this again.
anyway. I think it's very healthy, but I think
Cash is good.
But I think you are. I don't know. This is a weird one. You're obviously trying to make Labor nervous in Frank. I just don't see it. I think that Julie Collins will be returned pretty comfortably. I could be wrong. I just don't. It would just be a monumental shift, and obviously Peter George is so strong on salmon, but I just still think the majority of people will vote on other issues.
But but if you look at the messaging out of Peter George, there's been a shift in what he's talking about.
It's
he's
straight teal stuff now.
Yeah, that's exactly right. He's started to take that whole mantle.
Is he not a teal? He's
Not officially, but he
He's
is.
a teal, though. Like everything about him is a teal.
Well,
vote
there
for
you
the
go.
teal. Vote for that guy.
All right.
Just to be clear, lest I be verbaled afterwards, I'm not saying that he's going to win. I'm saying that he's giving Julie a very hard run for it, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's an upset. I think Julie is still ahead, but there's a week to go, and the fact that she's campaigning for her life tells me that she is very, very worried.
Yep. All right.
Well, it'll be interesting to see. It would be a monumental effort, but I've been wrong before.
I am saying he's a teal.
Well, and I don't think we're exactly disagreeing with that proposition, teal by any other colour. But anyhow, look, one more thing just before we go, Brad. I think you've got a few thoughts on what might be going on up in Braddon.
Oh no, well, not really, not just Braddon, but Alex mentioned the Senate earlier.
Yep.
So obviously, Senator Anne Urquhart stepped down from the Senate, officially resigned to run as Labor's candidate for Braddon. And I think the general sentiment is that she probably unsuccessful in that. But I'm told that she did that on the basis that the Prime Minister promised her that she could have her seat straight back, which can be done under the system, just to be renominated in Tasmanian Parliament to vote for you, Bob's your uncle.
Okay.
Problem is, I'm also told that the same promise has been made to Rebecca. So,
Interesting.
in the circumstance, which perhaps may not come to pass, but in the circumstance where both of them were to lose their contests, 2 doesn't go into 1.
No.
So I mean, I'm even told that allegedly Anne Urquhart is offering her old staff jobs on the basis that they'll have their job back because she'll be either a reps member or a senator after the election. So. And I think there's a few people in Labor that might be so keen on, and who's been a loyal servant of the party, being put back into the Senate after all that time.
Yeah.
But I'm not a Labor person.
No. Jack?
I've heard some of the similar things. I think, Anne has served very admirably for 14, 15 years and has taken on a difficult challenge in Braddon, and a lot of credit to her for that. But there will be a vacancy in the Senate, and that vacancy will need to be filled by someone. My view is the Labor Party is obviously kind of in need of some renewal in those ranks, and I think it doesn't make a lot of sense to me to reappoint someone who's served a good innings in the Senate, and I think that there are a number of candidates in the state who would want to put their hand up for that. And I think a good contrast is this. When Senator Katrina Billick not resigned, didn't recontest this election, that's a Labor right faction seat.
Yep.
And they pre-selected Richard Dowling, next generation candidate, great policy background in business. And I think that's the way forward. I think that's a good model for how Labor, and in this case the left faction, should fill that seat.
I see Becher smirking a bit over there. What's that
Well,
about,
I think
Becher?
it's because there's a vacancy and Anne Urquhart doesn't fill it. It's between Jack and Beach.
No, I'm a Canadian citizen. It's not me.
Oh, great.
Just before anyone. Yeah, no.
Yeah, definitely not me. That's for sure. Or okay.
No, I was actually intrigued with Jack's words there because without really revealing too much about my sources, I did receive a tip-off from an anonymous tip-off from a Gmail account that included the words Labor renewal as an address.
Funny.
Oh.
Yeah. I think
So it seems like your
No, I
views
don't-
might be shared. I'm not saying it was
That's
you
a
that
that's
said
a
it.
group that exists on the mainland. But if it, I didn't know it'd come to Tasmania.
Yeah, there you
Doing
go.
these kind of podcasts would be a very good idea if you were going to run at some
Yep.
point.
So, but it does.
I'm not.
It does suggest, I think,
I'm just
that
saying.
your views, Jack, about renewal in the Labor Party
Yes.
and Senator Urquhart or ex-Senator Urquhart are not just your views. They're
Yeah,
held
and,
in the
and
law.
the reason why I'm smirking a bit is because I've definitely heard that school of thought in the past, for what it's worth. Okay, that
And of course, casual vacancies are appointed by the Tasmanian Parliament.
they are.
Convention is that they're
Oh,
appointed by
yes,
the Premier on.
convention. Convention is, but we live in unusual times.
Well, we had one time
Maybe
where that did
AJ's
happen, and we had a
independents
constitutional
might
crisis.
have their own views on who should be a senator for Tasmania.
All right.
Imagine David O'Byrne voting for Rebecca White to the Senate.
Yeah.
Rebecca's going to win Lions, so I don't think that's going to be an issue.
Okay. AJ's giving me a funny look. That's time.
Oh, no, it's just-
Quickly.
No, no.
Sam's giving us the wind up.
Okay, Senator Johnston is moving on. Right, FontCast is brought
I'm
to you.
available, absolutely.
He's available.
For which part?
I
I got a membership form for you. Do you?
I don't think he's particularly fussy. Well, but purple. What colour has? Who's
Tammy Tyrrell's purple.
There you go. Okay, you can join the Tyrrell party. All right. FontCast is brought to you by Enterprise Marketing and Research Services, Tasmanian's leading and trusted research provider, in part because
Watch this space.
we actually weight numbers and actually do thorough research before we release them. Thank you, Brad.
Great to be here.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you.
And thank you so much, Alex.
Thanks so much.
Don't forget to catch us on our YouTube channel, FontCast. FontCast is produced and directed by Sam Eichen from Eichen Media. We'll be back after the federal election to go through the entrails. Entrails. Oh, okay.
I always said intro.
Okay.
Entrails.
Entrails.
Oh, well,
How would Erica Betts say it?
Croissant.
croissant. Okay.
Thank you, Becher.
Right.
And the die has been cast.
That's it.
Oh, that's good.
Looking forward to some open mic truth telling from you all then, particularly Brad. Until
We'll see.
we'll see. I think he's got a story or two to tell. And until next time, carry on.